Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scoring for Gaming, another episode in which we'll talk about things that I use for video game soundtracks. That's a much better introduction than what I had done before, a lot more direct. In this video, we'll cover Studio One version 5. It just came out, I think, sort of like 3-4 days ago, something like that. And it's a new release, obviously, it's version 5, so it comes after 4. Fun enough. And there's quite a few good things about this new version that are, making me excited to talk about them. But most importantly, I'm covering these out of the fact that I am using Studio One. I have been using Studio One version 4, the Pro version, I think for a good 3 months now. There's projects for those of you who followed me. There's projects that I have done for video game scoring, and I wasn't using Studio One. But I think beginning of this year, I started talking to some friends and developers that I know, and we went into talking about video game scoring, and they're developing something for next year. So I got this gig of composing science fiction and cyberpunk music for this video game, and I had to pick a DAW. And this is where Studio One comes in, because I didn't really want to use anything that I've been using in the audio engineering world. And I was trying to find something that felt comfortable, but new enough to be fresh. And I remember using Studio One for some mixes and stuff. And I said, like, well, I'll check it out. So I was immediately brought into this very fast and quick and easy to learn, super cool interface. And I started using it. Now, the dev team of the game, after I think a couple weeks where I started sending audio, prompts and little things to do main menus and stings and stuff, they suggested me to use a different DAW, which I won't mention here because it's not, it wasn't Studio One. The whole team is working on another DAW software, and they were of the idea that if I had worked on their same DAW, we would have had less issues or, mishaps or whatever can happen between different people working on different pieces of software. In the end, I did try and adapt to their workflow, but the way I compose and how I built my templates and stuff around was so fast and convenient on Studio One that I had to drop the mic and say, like, I won't do it. It's getting to a point where it's affecting how fast I am to develop the music you're asking. So they kind of allowed me to sort of like bridge the gap and keep using, Studio One for composing, because there was really no practical way to be fast in integrating everything to the new DAW. And that's for practicality reasons. Most importantly, I would say it's about that. I know my way around this DAW for composing, and when you get into the good habit of using it for specific tasks, there's a reason why you keep using what works. You want to be versatile and fast, and you don't want to focus on the technical aspects. You just want it to work. So in the end, we're using kind of both things, I think, if I remember right, but the composing part of the whole soundtrack and what I'm doing here is still Studio One. So when 5 came out a couple days ago, I looked at it and I was like, I really like it. It's kind of cool. And we can look at one tune that I wrote, I think it's 5 or 6 years ago. I should check the timestamps on the original session. I brought it back in from a different DAW software I was using at the time, and it's something that I never released or used, and I thought it would be perfect while I was scouting some of the music that I wanted to produce for this soundtrack. I thought it would be perfect for a part of the game where you are sort of in a desert environment. So it has to talk about sand, it has to talk about hot weather, it has to feel deserted in a way. Not desert that would feel cool, more of a desert feel. So it was initially called Desert Recon, and I think it was for something that I had written in the style of whatever military army action part where there's some sort of desert reconnaissance, I would say. That was at least the name. They gave it away that these could have been something that works for these video games. So it's still very much still in the draft. And let's take a look at the whole session in a little bit in depth. It's already opened in Studio One 5. So I brought it back from OMF to, I think, just MIDI, and then from the MIDI I took it into Studio One version 4. And then I adapted some of the stuff, and then I got it back into Studio One version 5, and I just opened it and it just worked. So there's nothing really fun about these. There's nothing really exciting, but the exciting thing is that it actually worked right away. Like, I really opened the session in version 5 and it inherited everything it had to inherit from version 4. And many of you might say, that's pretty stereotypical. That's what should happen. Yeah, all right. But it doesn't always happen the same exact way. These are complicated sessions. They're not too complicated. It's still not very big of a session, but there's a lot of contact libraries. There's a lot of plugins from the old Studio One into here. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong. Nothing so far went wrong. So I wrote down, pencil and paper, the features that Studio One 5 has. So I would think that in this hour and a half, I don't know, we'll take a look at things that I think I will use, that I won't use because of my scoring things. Hey, Marel, how you doing? Welcome. Thanks for being here. So I thought we would talk about that, and to do this, as I was saying, I wrote it down on paper because that's the best way to do it. So I don't really know where I would start, but maybe the easiest things first. So the easiest things are usually the ones that you wouldn't think that Studio One didn't have, but it actually didn't so far. So they implemented a score function. The score function, and I'm going through the obvious interface because the interface of version 5 is identical to version 4, I would say. There's minor improvements. I don't know if the colors are different, but I use the custom color scheme, so I don't really know if this is too different, but it didn't feel like colors or anything else was different. So that's a kudos. I really like that version 5 does not completely overhaul anything because it was working, it works. I don't see why they would have needed to overhaul, but some brands still have to do it to keep things fresh, right? So they didn't change the interface at all. We still have the MIDI, the sketch pads, the browser, whatever, everything is there. However, there's a much needed score function now here. So let's go through all these functions one by one and see if I can find them, because I haven't been really reading manuals or all that. We'll just go and explore Studio One. So when you double click on a MIDI segment, you do get a sort of pop up from the bottom, MIDI part. And here in this left hand side of it, you have a piano, which is the piano view. Then you have a drum view, and then you have a score view. So if you go to score view, you can see that there's finally a score. So these might be not too important to you, for example, but I guarantee you that if you work with musicians that you need to hire for, whatever session, which happens a lot in things like, especially these parts, you probably want a score function of any sort in your DAW to get the need from a musician to print some sheet music, and not being able to do it within your DAW is a major pain in the back. Not down there, but in the back for sure. It's a major pain because you need to export the MIDI and then bring it back into a notation software and then edit it and then blah, 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 and all that. So it's very convenient that this one now has not only a way to see the score, but you can do all musical symbols and, get default velocities so you can compose and play through the score view. If you're that kind of guy. I'm not that kind of guy. I used to be in digital performer when I was 17, 18. I stopped. It's yeah, I do this when I have real musicians once I have to print their sheets, but now I'm much more of a MIDI piano roll kind of guy. Reason for this is that there's a lot more control over things that I need to address in velocity, in a lot of modulation factors and things. So I've become a piano roll guy. But nonetheless, the score is very, very important to have. So again, they implemented the score. However, they also implemented something like a piano, sort of like drum roll part. So let me see if I have some hits here. I do, but for example, the desert gongs. These are just 2 hits, and they're usually represented by MIDI notes, which I'm perfectly fine with. But if you want this to be drum, you can set it up so that you have single hits. And this is a much better way of handling rhythmic tracks, for sure. So you still have your instrument, you still have, your name, tabs, and whatever. I think you can rename this. You can play it as sort of pads. And I think you can I give it a name? Maybe. Oh, well, you can repitch it and you can get a feel for it and you can call it. Yeah, that's exactly that. So you can build a representation of the drum parts, which I don't usually use, but I know a lot of colleagues of mine that they do. So you can name these, for example, gong 1 and gong 2, and conveniently with tab you can go there. So now we have a name, gong 1 and gong 2. And I haven't read any instruction for this. I'm doing this completely different than any video that's out there already. So when you want to get in depth in technicalities with Studio One, you'll watch some other video. We're not here to talk about menu by menu explanations. I just want to show you how I do use and why I do use Studio One and what I find important, especially in the context of soundtrack writing for video games, which is also for movies. I have to say video games and movies are getting closer and closer and closer, at least in my world. So it both applies to scoring music for something, for video content or interactive stuff. So there you have it. There's this very convenient way of handling this part. I think if we drop to the bongos, we have different sounds, for example. Now there's a lot of delays, so you're hearing different hits, but this is a delay from this track. It's probably within the sense. It shouldn't, but yeah, it is. No? All right, so it's built in the virtual instrument. Okay. So I usually have no issues in working like this. This is a typical Spectrasonic behavior of MIDI, right? When the groove control part that was invented by Spectrasonic splits MIDI parts. But you could go for some drum machines and effect stuff this way. It's a much faster way to understand how things are playing, because when you have single hits, it really doesn't matter how long the MIDI is unless it's a groove or a loop, right? So it's a single hit. Doesn't matter how long the note is, it's only the note on event that counts in MIDI. So that's why a little bit of a sort of a play button is much convenient. And you can still apply all musical functions to whatever, even a selection. It just works like a piano roll. It's just easier to understand. You can quantize, like everything is there. Speaking of this, I don't know if I mentioned, but one thing that I really like about Studio One is this button here, which is the synchronize editor to arrangement. So if it is disengaged, the top and the bottom are unlinked in terms of horizontal zoom. But when you do engage this, the segments in the top portion of the screen will always match the segments in the bottom part of the screen. That's fun. To me, that's fantastic. I really like that the zoom factor never sort of makes me lose orientation, the orienteering, right? I'm always capable of seeing where I am in the session, and I don't mind zooming in from the top to get something on the bottom, and vice versa. So I really, really like this. And that covers the score thing. I'm going to do check marks on all this. Piano drum, talked about it. There's some things that I noticed that is, I want to go to something they implemented now, which is really cool. This, I actually am not sure whether or not any other DAW can do this, but they did introduce mix scenes. So this to me is incredibly important. So here's what you can do. You go to the show scenes console. For a moment, I couldn't pronounce this. Show scenes. It's this button here. And you have scenes from your mixer. So you have an option to determine or choose what you want to recall. There's a visibility of the tracks, there's volume, pan, mute, insert, sends, cue mix, and input controls. And what you can do here is you can take your whole mix board and save it as a scene and call it like test scene. So now all of the parameters that are in here are saved within this test scene. If I do one little change, for example, I add whatever, I don't know, if I add an effect, for example, 60 or a mix, dual pan, whatever, dual pan here, it's not gonna be what I saved here in this. So let me try and do this. Test scene 2, we go to 1 and we go recall. And he's recalling everything, making sure that the difference between test 1 and 2 are the same. So everything you do in the session gets recalled and gets added as a scene. I would rather say it like this, gets added and captured as a snapshot. But then you're able to choose what you want to recall. So whenever you save a snapshot, a scene, you're always going to capture everything. It's up to you then to say, you know what, I want to recall test scene 2, but mostly for the inserts, for example, which is what we know changed. Like, because I really liked something that was happening in the inserts. I'm not totally sure it was there. So you go here, you go recall, and then you have test scene 2, and you notice that dual pan is back. This to me is really awesome. I'm not sure other DAWs can do that. I know, for example, Pro Tools that I use does that, but it's sort of an import session data, and it's fantastic and it works and I love it. It's okay. But it's a different thing from within the session itself. This is really, really cool. And how would I use this? Sometimes I get to a point where the song is finished and I'm trying different things. For example, here in the previous mix, which wasn't actually mix, was like a sort of a raw test. I had a parallel compression here with an omnipressor from Eventide. This is something I used to do years and years ago. I think actually when omnipressor came out. Something like that. I was so excited about this compressor. I still think it's an amazing tool to have. All the Eventide bundles are fantastic. And here, for example, here I spotted a sort of a routing problem. I could go here and go test scene 2, and I go update scene. So now test scene has been updated with my latest development. And I could rename this, call it like test scene no paracomp. Right? Now, if we want to implement this, I go, turn on the sends on the parallel compressors that I had, and I can update this scene. So now test scene 2 is identical to what I'm having here. So if I go update recall scene, you'll notice that he just took a look at whatever I was having here and said like, well, okay, he's recalling test scene. We remember the snapshot he took, and there it is. If we go to test scene 2 and we recall it, we have a different mix. Now, it's only 4 things that get turned off and on. But imagine if it was a completely different attempt at mixing this song. Or if it was mix 02, mix 03, mix 04. Working with clients and doing revisions of a mix, you open this session and you don't have to save it with different file names. You save it in a scene, a mix scene, and you call it mix 03B, for example. Then the next day, the client comes back and says, it's a fantastic mix. It's just fantastic. I'm talking out of experience. It happens a lot. Mix 03B is just fantastic. However, we should do something like bringing the drum room a little bit higher up. You bring it back up, and for example, something no longer works. For example, the bass just needs a little bit of an adjustment. So you also make that change with the client on the bass. Then you snapshot that, you call it mix 04, and you print the mix and give it to the client. The next day or a week after, the client calls and says, mix 04, the last one we've done, it's just fantastic. However, you know what? You were kind of right. The guitars in mix 02 were the best ones we had because they had a little bit more edge, and we asked you to remove it, but now we realized you were actually right. It sounds much better. How about we bring back the guitars from mix 02 into mix 04? So you can do that within Studio One. I could have done this if I had worked with Studio One, because what you do, well, in Pro Tools I did it in a different way. It's still convenient, but here you could just say selected channels only, for example, selecting just the guitars, and go recall scene. So now he's only applying, he's putting his attention to the tracks I've selected. And his attention goes to those tracks, and he says like, well, okay, depending on what he wants to recall, the paracomp was the thing that he had different in the two snapshots. And there you have it. You instantly have the guitars from mix 02 being recalled in mix 04. So you could call this instantly with an add scene, call it like mix 05, for example. And you're done. And it's a much faster way to handle mixes, because most of you, like me, have been doing it by closed session, open mix 02. Now you have mix 02 in front of you, and you're saying like, okay, the guitars are fine. How do we bring it back into mix 04? Every DAW does it differently, but the problem is you have a session in front of you, and to get back to the new one that you need to update, you need to close it and go back. So memory sometimes doesn't serve you well and all that stuff. So this is much, much faster. I think out of everything that I've listed, mix scenes is by far, I would say, the top two things that they've added, which I really love. Really love. This is fantastic. If I had to go to the second thing that they added, I think clip gain envelopes are what we totally needed for some time. However, I really don't know how to do it. Let's see. Make clip gain envelopes. How do we do clip gain envelopes here? Maybe we have to do parameter, tune, mode, tempo. Maybe we do this. Oh, okay. I see up top here, there's a line. So how about we do, what is this, a volume thing? General volume? Could be, right? I think we'll have it. We'll handle it. So it's definitely changing the clip gain. Yes. So here, I assume we can pencil things around, and we can go, maybe not. Hold on. Maybe we create a point here. Can we? Maybe with a pencil? No. Here, plus. Okay, this cuts it. That's not bad. That's a fade. It's okay. Let's solo these and hear this part. Okay, so how about I want to clip gain this? So we have a meter here, we have a pencil, we have a split tool, we have band tool, different stuff. See, haven't read the manual, so I really don't know. However, this is clearly. What if I do double click? So this is clearly clip gaining to what we wanted to do. But maybe that's not exactly what they implemented. However, this is kind of cool. And you can even bend these in exponential fade in. So I think part of this was already in Studio One 4. I don't usually clip gain stuff, as I don't record things in Studio One with real microphones. I usually have virtual instruments in here, at least in the first stage. So I have no idea. Reset gain envelope. Okay, so the gain envelope definitely is something that we're doing here. Cropped content. Well, maybe you'll have to trust me on this. They did add it. And then it kind of works even in segments. We could sometimes I like to do it this way. Let me see if this works. How about I cut this guy here and do the mix gain differently? Is it cross-fadeable? It isn't. Is it? Is it? People at Presonus are gonna hate me because they're gonna go like, this guy, he doesn't read the manuals. Yes, it's supposed to be unreading manual. So this is something I like to do sometimes in Pro Tools as well. If you snap it right, you might be able to do it, in a way that it's kind of precise. But I think you can draw it around, and it will come to me in a second or something. Well, it works. I don't hear steps of any sort. How about we fade it in like this? We can do that. It's pretty easy. There we go. There's a lot of tail, but we could do this just to test. It works. Works for me in segments. I've seen the tutorial though. They can do it with normal envelopes. That's fantastic. How about, there's a chord track. It's great. So gain envelopes for whoever used Pro Tools. You're probably gonna say like, it's just clip gain. Well, clip gain was a huge introduction within Pro Tools, and I'm guessing this is really also gonna be incredibly cool for this. I'm looking at automation and stuff. I don't think that it's in here. Transform, collapse, apply names, expand envelopes. Okay, volume makes sense, but this is mostly volume and pan envelopes. So, it's probably gonna be in here. However, you can clip gain easily your thing up and down, and it doesn't really click. We did a couple major changes in the waveform. It kind of worked smoothly through it, so I'm even confident that it has a little bit of a smoothing factor to it. At least it didn't sound in my headphones a little bit like some popping or stuff like that. So I would say clip gaining is the second, probably around the top 3 things that they added, because you can sometimes you print or you have a sample and it's just a little bit obnoxious, and clip gain has become a huge part of whoever works in those, I think. So the other thing that I really loved is something I don't use, but it's called key switches. So let me take a look at some instruments that, for example, could use key switches, and if they don't, it's okay. So here, choir down pitch should be it. That should not be it. So let's take a look at Guzin. Guzin is a fantastic library from a Turkish woman that just sings, fantastic lines. It looks like this. So this was used at the time. I was using multi-instruments in contacts, which I kind of don't do anymore. But here's the key switches. So this instrument has a red area here and some blue areas and a green one here. So whenever I change, now it's set on D. If I change these and put it on C, for example, the key should change. It's just a different way of organizing samples. So now we are in D, and she's playing every line in D, which is a funny thing because I think this tune was in C minor harmonic, and there's maybe a reason why I put it in D. Let's say I did it intentionally and professionally. I also use a lot of auto-tune on these samples because I never want them to sound too natural. I always wanted to sort of cyberpunk-ize them. And so it's probably getting bent to hell to a C minor from the D. But you see there's peaceful, there's wonder, there's strong, there's joyful, there's remembrance. These are packages of moods, I would say, which is relating to different samples. So if I go to Lament, It's a different switch from peaceful and stuff. And some of the instruments here, they do have them. Not in the case, I thought Guzin had it, but it works for what we're going to do. They have these different keys elements where you can do a key switch and have, different platforms of sounds. So in this case, it's not this, but it works anyway. So suppose that we want to take control of these key switches here. And these are not really MIDI notes in the sense that they don't produce a sound, but they're used to trigger sounds. Let me see, do I have SonarWorks here? Yeah. Okay. So let me disable SonarWorks because we're not using it. You don't have the same headphones I do have. So this sound. What happens if I go C? It does change. So these are actually all different articulations from the same peaceful sort of macro group. So what I would want to do, I don't personally do it that much, but I think it's because I didn't have it. But there's other dolls like Cubase that had it for a while, and there's a lot of people that use that love it. So we could map these and call this thing Guzin. So, or Guzin. Note controller, key switches. So you go to key switches now, and you have the opportunity to just go, wrench and call this. Can we do a new one? Store preset. Okay, let's store it immediately and call it Guzin. Now, there's an accented letter I can borrow from the Italian. There we go. That's 100% Guzin, right? So we could even probably call it Guzin Peaceful, I think, because every set changes, does it or not? No. Okay, so Guzin works. Fantastic. So we go here. You can see that I selected that, and we can go pitch. Let me see which key this thing is. It starts from an A that I don't have. So let me go octave down. There, yeah. So it goes from this A to E flat. No, to a G sharp, A flat. Okay, so A here. Awesome. And we can set these to be named key switches. So the first thing here is, does it react to my note? Yes. So we go here and we just do it. Oh, fantastic. It just does it here. We have to get to G sharp. There we go. And we could call them key switch 1. We could call them, I don't know, sample group 1, right? Then we go to here. Oh, it's fast. We can do this. I can do this. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not that the original name wasn't right, but and 13. Do we have more? No. Actually, these I don't think it's used. So we go here. Or can we remove it? No? Oh, well, it's okay. Let's do this. It's fantastic. So now we go OK. And now we have this group, which is saved for Guzin. And whenever we have this part, we can make sure that we're using a D from that D part, right? So here we go, should be this key. Now we have a key switch turned on. So it's a sample group 6, for example. And right? But if we move it to sample group 5, okay, that's the same, but just pitch. Fantastic. 4. It's a different one. So if you have different group names, for example, spiccato strings, marcato, pizzicato, sustained, you can call these with their respective names and save it with the name of the library. And then you know for sure that when you're playing notes, you don't have to use the MIDI note from the key switch into the piano roll. Because what happens usually is you don't see it right away. You think it's a note, and it's actually, let's call it a utility note, for example. So it's a MIDI note you use to trigger a group of samples. And it's a much better way this way to deal with it than to use MIDI notes. Now, I've been doing it with MIDI notes. It works, you know that. But sometimes you forgot about it and you go like, why is this sample not triggering? And in more complicated sessions, I guarantee you spending the time to do the sample groups or the key switches for it, for that one sample library you use all the time, it's just gonna be much faster. I think maybe you can also find them with time on the internet for free. Some people are gonna release them. So this is really, really cool. And I would say this makes the top 3. The score, the mix scenes, top 4. Score, mix scenes, clip gain, and key switches. By all means, this is the best. Let's go back to 6. Boop, 6. And it can be really small. Doesn't matter because it just says, key switch. So just maybe enough to see the name here. We could call them A0, for example, A sharp. That's the same thing. The group 6 we call D1. And this we call D sharp 1. You immediately know you're in D1, and if you move it here in D sharp 1, then you have, and if you go D, and this has to play in the whole line. You can keep it there just so that you can make sure that you have the correct thing. And with one track, you could have spiccato strings, move to pizzicato, and then go back to spiccato, and you can see the segments of your key switches. A lot of people I know like to work with key switches. So if you do, Studio One 5 becomes a viable solution. Before, you actually couldn't really get the key switches this conveniently. So top 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are definitely what I like the most. And it's not say we, maybe you don't, but to me, this is incredibly, incredibly great. Then there's some things that, for example, I won't really use, and I have no way maybe to test it somehow. It's the set lists. Let me take a look at this. Set lists. Let me make sure first off that we got sound in this. Yes, we do. You never know. So set lists. I think it goes to here in show. Empty show. All right. This is kind of complicated for what? Let me see. View. Maybe there's a set lists page. I think it's a show. Let's try this and call it like test show. Empty show, real instruments, stem playback, virtual effects rack. This is the same. That's another thing I wanted to demonstrate. Let's try and do this. Show with set lists. Fantastic. So what do we have here? I think here we can really set the different songs to be played. It looks to me as if we're able to control things and do performances. And this is, as I said, not something I would personally use for composing soundtracks, but I'm sure a lot of people that come from Ableton Live and other things are gonna enjoy these because it's a fantastic way to organize your show, and you can bring this to a whole different level of having any parameter or songs or things that you want to play into one session of Studio One. So it sort of becomes, it turns Studio One into an incubator of songs that go into one set list. And you can play them in real time. And if you have a band where you're playing things in real time, for example, that's going to be incredibly convenient because then you have all sorts of synths that change and parameters and stuff. And there's something else. You can go to to performance control. So all the parameters here are probably able to be changed. Control link or something. I know I'm touching things, but nothing is doing much, but nothing is actually working. Oh, look at this. Is it changing on there? Oh yeah. All right. That's good. Doesn't do it from here. That's probably just because I'm not linking it right, but it's okay. Another thing that I saw, let me see if I can undo my way around. Song, Desert Recon. Wanted to switch to the song, fantastic. When I did show, now he's switching to song. I could do a new show, and I saw virtual instruments. Virtual instruments player for synths and piano plus backing tracks. So, or virtual effects rack, 16-channel virtual effects rack to use with the Studio Live Series 3 mixer. So this is a very cool thing that they added. You can use Studio One as a virtual instruments player, playback system, like a real-time ROM player sorts for your projects. So you can go live and use it as main stage for those of you who used Apple main stage, for example. That's sort of, I think, where they wanted to go. 16-channel virtual effects rack for use, yeah, with the live mixer. Or then you have stem playback where you can play back stems with 10 backing track players. This is all aimed at shows. They're called shows. So it's a live gig. Maybe you need real instruments to get mixed and buzzed. Maybe you need stem playback because you have backing tracks. When I was playing with some bands, we had backing tracks for special effects and stuff that we couldn't do with a 5-piece band. Some special vocoder tracks, all those things. You can do that with stem playback. Virtual effects track is more probably for having a sort of a mix template, so it sort of works around like a venue thing. They really reached out to all the different solutions that so far are in the audio market for live. And then virtual instruments, keyboards player going on stage, needing virtual instruments for playing. So not in my top 4 for sure. Then I don't know why I made it the top 4, like the number 4, but for sure, set lists and virtual instruments live use, these are gonna be amazing for people who are into the Ableton Live sort of scene, scenario. Then there's aux channels, and this is actually more convenient than I might think. You can create buses, effects, and VCAs. These are what we already had in version 4, but you have an aux channel. What is an aux channel? An aux channel is a channel that can route something from an internal hardware insert into the inside of Studio One back into some other channel, for example. So I can route it anywhere I want, for example, in this case. And aux channels are convenient because so far you really never had the way to do this kind of routing in and out, through and through, like bullets. Without going to, I think, audio tracks. I didn't try and do it, but I think that was probably the way to do it in Studio One 4, but because it's an audio track, it's supposed to... what's the difference between audio tracks and aux tracks? Well, aux tracks do not have a record, engage, arm button, and you can see that. This is sort of an instrument track. Let's get... they have a small piano icon. They have a small wave icon. These are printed tracks. These are instruments that I sort of froze there. So now it's an audio track. It has a record, a listen button, and it has an input and an output. But the aux channel here that will make conveniently, I don't know, red, this guy here does not have a record button. Why? Because it's an aux channel. It's supposed to just route something from something to something else. So that's very cool. And you obviously have access to the whole inserts and parameters that, are part of the mixer here. So that's really, really cool. And we can hide it or remove it. They don't pop up in the edit. So that's also convenient because I wouldn't want aux channels to be here, honestly. There's no reason. So they only pop up here in the mixer. So you see the scenes now show mismatch. I'm curious to see what happens if we go recall scene. Oh, it says mismatch, so scene does not match channels. And because it doesn't match channels, I'm not allowed to do a recall. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. Go remove. Oh, now we're matching there. So we go recall, and we have the whole mix 5. If we go no parallel, we go recall, and he's going to do his testing and stuff. Oh, it's only on selected channels, so we do here, recall. Okay. Let me try and create the aux channel and go with the mismatch. So let's make these red so we see when it pops away. What if I recall a scene that has a mismatch? Ha! All right. So I get a warning thing that the scene is no longer coherent, but I can undo my way around. Yes. Will I get back the aux channel if I keep undoing? Ha! No. So that's something worth noting. I can't undo my way around. Or maybe yes. No, I can't. All right. So I can undo and redo the scenes, but I don't get the channels that I lose. So better, take a nice look at that mismatch, because if the scene does not match channels, then, you might lose the channel, you're not able to get it back. But we know that, we're safe. We're okay with that. And then there's the next thing that I just wrote down there. It's called listen bus. Listen bus, I saw it here. And solo through listen bus, enable listen bus. Now, what is this? Suppose that I want the RMX to go to listen bus. Okay. What happens here? I now have a listen bus. That's cool. That's cool. Let's go to the beginning of this draft of a song. So you can still hear what I'm doing here, okay? But it's also going to a listen bus. That's kind of cool. What is this doing? So listen bus goes post to where? It's probably supposed to be something for queue systems, which is kind of cool. I'm not in need of using these. Actually, these are two old routings that I had. I no longer use it. I use just this stream channel. And what else? This should be probably, I see it's getting duplicated. Okay, so now we're sending the RMX being queued here. So now it's going to this part. If I lower this, gets a lot of the effects. My guess would be that because I just sent the RMX to the listen bus, the effects are not going through the listen bus. So that's pretty cool. It's a queue system. Pre-fader or post-fader. We can set the click volume to a different one. You can make it mono. We can turn these on. So it has a metronome as every other thing. And I solo through audio IO setup. I think it has to be, oh, there we go. So listen bus is basically the fastest way to go to creating some sort of queue mix. I can't really think about any other name than listen bus is a queue mix. So you could have done it by hand. Not saying that it's not a new thing, but you could have done it in version 4 as far as this works. It's just easier because you go, boom, enable listen bus. Like, yo, dude, I want this to go there. Boom, I want this to go there. And it's a much more dynamic way than having the channel set there. But if you have a studio and you have set up things right, you probably already had a queue channel. There might be a convenience in these in the hardware form. We should go check the manual in version 5 because there might be some hardware convenience, like a listen bus has maybe reduced latency, whatever. I don't know. Sure, could have worked somehow. So listen bus, anyway, cool, because it's just fast. It just makes the studio feel more integrated and stuff. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is MIDI timecode sync and MIDI machine control. Now, I won't show you this because I don't have MIDI timecode syncs to be done or any need for MIDI machine control in here, but that's great because if you have any sort of beat clock compliant thing like Moog echoes, pedals, or whatever they use it, this is really, really going to be fantastic because now you have all the syncs with the timecode stuff that MIDI uses. A lot of people that compose in Studio One do have a lot of MIDI things that they want to have synced, because otherwise it's just a huge mess, and then the analog hardware part of production becomes so boring and long and technically frustrating. And I think this was a very much needed addition. I have to say, I admit, I didn't know that the implementation of Studio One wasn't that thorough with MIDI machine control. I thought it was already, but it wasn't. So they kind of did it. So, and then the fun part, better native plugins. Introducing Tricomp. Okay, so let's listen to. Do we want to recall this? Did I mess this completely up? We go to revert. No, let's not revert. I hope I didn't change it too much. So this is sort of the beginning of the song. I'm gonna put a mix tool here. How loud are we? Huh, not that much. Could have been further. Okay. That was just the very first part with the sand thing and stuff. So suppose that I want to use here on the RMX. Let me take a part where the RMX is kind of playing. I used a lot of RMX back then, and it's part of this session. Okay. There's an absent too here. So this session is actually cool to testing this stuff out because I was using a lot of plugins from Studio One. For example, here on the Bright pad, I had Fat Channel XT. And what it did is inherited version 5 and just kept the settings from version 4. I think the best thing that they did to Fat Channel is that everything's now vertically here. So you have HPF gate, equalizer, compressor, limiter, because it's a super good channel strip. And back then I was using it a lot more than I am now, but it just works. They did these sort of, how could we call this? It's sort of a satin plastic feel. I really like the colors and the stuff here of this. But there's also, for example, mix tool that I use a lot, just slightly changed. Yes, they have these knobs now that are darker and more serious and interesting somehow. What was I using here from the Studio One bundle? Fat Channel, mostly Fat Channel I really liked. Yes, I think Fat Channel is a little bit everywhere. Fat Channel XT everywhere, yeah, and Mix Tool. So that was mostly what I had. But let me see how. We go to Isotope. No, sorry, we go to Presonus. And we go to, where's that guy? Tricomp. Here it is. So this is kind of a very cool input-output mix, low, high, low freak, high freak, compressor, freak, frequency, frac. But how do you abbreviate that? Freak. Release, fast, normal, slow, saturation. So what do we try it on? Maybe here, I want to try it on two things. So this part I really like. I mean, now it's just a draft, and the day before I only added this part because I really like this. Let's try and see how it works if we put it just on an RMX, which I wouldn't want to do. Ooh. I'm obviously destroying it. So there's a mix, there's a release, there's a saturation, fast, normal, slow, auto. This is from State Space. These people are dangerously good at making analog emulations of things. So it's kind of a little bit gritty. I thought it would be more of a, I don't know, sort of a smoother thing. It gets very, very aggressive with all these like, sort of like, it's already a sharp. There's a lot of sharp frequencies within these sort of fake real percussion, right? But what I notice is that these low frequency, low frequencies are side chains for the compressor. So if we want the lows to trigger the compressor less, there we go. We go low. Okay, that's kind of interesting now. Okay, I can hear that it has sort of a grainy vibe. Or at least it brings more the grainy vibe of it. Could make for a... Okay. Okay, interesting. I mean, I wouldn't use it here on the RMX, but I think it's mostly parallel. It's mostly interesting to me in the parallel way of doing things. So let me try it somewhere else. I have a part here where there's sort of shouts from sort of tribal shouts. Get bored. Get. Okay, and it would sound like this. There's also a brassy part that I really love the melody of. Okay, so what's going on here is that this thing is way too loud and maybe moved in MIDI. Maybe the MIDI didn't get it right. Let me first try where the shouts are. Here's these people, all right. It's really loud, I think. There we go. This thing is really... okay. Some samples are a little bit off, some samples are a little bit on. This would need to get printed. So let's take this part and play. You see the vibe where I'm going. It has to feel incredibly scorching heat in the sound. So here it is, a very long effect. It's supposed to be a sand storm effect, whatever. So this looks like there's... It's called Desert Recon because these people are specialized in living. It's the game where it came from, it was supposed to be very highly trained, skilled desert forces. So these people know how to go around in practical scenarios in the desert where other people would just die out of the scorching heat. So the song had to have this sort of like effect of heat. Now, these shouts, for example, it's all a draft, but if I had to hear those, that's why I wanted to use it on these. I want it to be not featured, but I want them to be behind these textures of high frequencies and stuff. And so that's why I wanted to use this parallel compressor, which kind of, I have to say, works because it gets grainy enough for this mix. But I don't want these vocals to pop out of the sandstorm. So it's like there's silhouettes you can distinguish within the sandstorm, but you can't really make out the very detail of their figures. So they have to float within. I'll probably do a lot of volume automation as well, but that's just to prove that with the high frequency and high gain and low frequency, I could do this. This is kind of cool. I have a lot of other compressors I would use, honestly, but it works. I mean, it's within Studio One. So they also gave a lot of plugins in the original bundle, a lot of relooks. So this is Omnisphere, Dynamic Choir Wheel. Let's hear these guys, for example. All right. All right. It's a very high pitch thing. Where are these guys going? Okay, let's try some delay or, well, for example, they have Empire. Empire, they kind of reworked it around. And this is, I love this plugin. It's just I have no use usually for it. But for example, I could use something like chorus. I just want to see like the normal ones. Pedalboard, Red Light District. I used to love. Oh, they didn't change this. That's good. That's good. This was Red Light District. Is just one of my favorites in the bundle. Let me see here. Open Air, Room, Reverb, Spectrum. They all Extreme. How about Extreme or multi-band dynamics? Let's look at this. Okay, so different look. This is another, people, if you're looking for multi-band compressor and you're using Studio One, don't just experiment with demos. Just try this thing out first because it works. So for example, if I want to address this area, let's try and have fun a little bit on this thing. It's so easy to use. So I don't know, I would go on for, there's 2 thresholds, which is really nice, sort of ozone-ish if you're used to it. Lots of knee. And there's this area here. Then I want to sort of compress a little bit more. Right on. It's pretty transparent. Works really well. We're reining in. It's so transparent. Alright? And then I want to go to this lead. Ah, this melody I loved so much. Let me try. I just love it. At least I do love my songs. It's a good thing. So now let's try. Maybe this is gonna be too much. Tube Dreamer, Pack Horrors. How about we don't use this? Okay, sensitivity low, it's already a start. And we have an MCM 800. And these are so cool. I mean, look at this. It's just hyper cool. What would we use on this? Probably no, just a generic cabinet. We can remove this, and we can put another stomp. It's from this thing. This guy has a lot of. Oh, okay, it's Morpher. That's a different cool rendition. Let's try this. Why not? Let's try it. We're trying. Delay. Maybe on a parallel bus. Why not? Reverb, reverb. So, not what I intended initially, but I want to try cabinet though. Hold on. Let's try cabinet. It will never work, but do we have a through? Oh. Okay. That makes sense. I'm having too much fun, sorry. Well, now this wouldn't work because we're not doing guitars, but there's, what is this? Oh, mic edit controls. So if we pick a cabinet, I like this. Yes. Ooh, people. Again, I haven't had the chance to test this stuff because I haven't had need to amp stuff, but I mean, come on. This clearly looks like a 67, 87. This looks like a Royer. This looks like a 57. So you have condenser, you have dynamic, and you have ribbon. So you can mute them, you know, and you always get a 100%, which is kind of like. You can flip phase. You have a tuner. All right, that's pretty cool. I mean, I would still go with my because I don't want the melody to become just a blatant melody, but it works. And here the sandstorm keeps going in this part. That's cool. That's super cool. Let's try one last plug and then we're gonna call it a day on this bowed metal. Let's go to Izo. Let's go to. I keep wanting to go to Isotope for some reason. Presonus. Man, what's wrong with you? Multiband Dynamics pedal board. I think pedal board inherits what we had here, so it's just the pedals. Oh, it's so cool. Okay, so this part it's a bowed metal. If it plays. Nice. Let's try this. Let's try a classic fat channel. All three of them. Boom. Filtered. Okay. Actually, can't really hear this going on. Oh yeah, of course, because the equalizer's off. So you're getting a picture of how the HBF would work, but the EQ is off. I was thinking that's a little bit bland for 12 dB. That makes sense. So I want to kind of address this, and I want to address this 1K. It's kind of moving, but right? And then we could compress it, maybe just, I don't know, let's try something crazy. 0.3, 60. Key filter, yes, we want to focus on all the high notes. Actually, 300. Let's kind of keep it soft knee, maybe? Auto release? No, auto nothing. Okay. Let's use compressor and EQ. So we had this. It works, I told you. And before it was starting up a little bit, maybe too warm. I don't know. Yes. Alright, well, there's no, I won't save these, but there's no risers, there's no impacts, there's no reverse percussions, which usually kind of segment the writing and kind of emphasize the transitions. Percussions are still a little bit weak. I mean, it's a draft from, I don't know how many years ago. What is it, like 5 instruments? No, it's like around more like 16. Although one is a huge drum machine and there's a couple samples, shouts, 2 choirs, Gregorian, whatever sample in the middle, 1 solo bowed metal, 1 solo brass, and a bass bright pad. Who's this guy? Zebra. Ah, this I moved to Zebra too. This was a different patch. I think it was Massive or something. And I used Downtown Shanghai. Still, the focus of all of this tune is the high sandy sandstorm effect. Like you have to have sand everywhere, you know, if you listen to this. So that concludes for the presentation, the showcase of all of these functions that Studio One has. Very cool. Everything kind of, I have to say, worked in the sense of making these a better DAW, but nothing really changed that much, which I love. I have to say, like, all the projects I opened and re-saved worked. There was no problems with whatsoever with virtual instruments, with Contact, with sample-based stuff. So it all worked. That's pretty fun and convenient. They made a new version without really changing too many things. So clearly that works. If you like this music, you should go check out the album that I am writing and releasing in, I don't know, like what it's been. It's been probably 3-4 months, maybe. Yes. It's called Future in the Past. And a lot of these music that you're hearing here is going to eventually go into Future in the Past. There's already 6 tracks there, and there's floppy disks. Yes, floppy disks that are being used for limited runs of single tunes, like singles in there, but you can get the album as well as a digital download, and it will then be out as a CD. So if you get any of the floppy disks now, which are, there's only some left, just a bunch of them, you'll be able to get the CD when it comes out, which is 9 to 10 songs, depending on whether or not I want to put one, which I'm still not sure of. So it's an ever-evolving solo project. The songs that you heard here and in Scoring for Gaming are part of that. So if you want to support the channel, if you want to do some good to music education that I do and free initiatives, please go there, buy the album. You also get a fantastic science fiction cyberpunk album. Come on. And you'll soon find, if you're watching this from the future, you'll soon find this song as well, I think, as soon as I'll be done taking this draft, which is the real first stage we're looking at around, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, remade into Studio One to a finished state. So again, thank you very much for being here. It was fantastic to have you. And thanks, Presonus, for the update. It works. Everything's fine. And we do like the things that you've added. So until next time, this was Scoring for Gaming. My name is Alberto. I run Fuse Room in Berlin. Ciao.